This week's been kind of busy, so sorry for not posting a lot. And the next couple weeks are going to be even more busy for me. I might not be doing lives over the next 2 weekends. I might just have to rely on doing videos for a minute. I might even be out of town for a second. So, let's get into these shadow creatures and say hello to everyone. Hey, Valentine. How you doing? Verdomo, hi. Welcome, Eric. All right. And I think I also may have found a historic name for the Mothman. Although I am having, and I found it in a manuscript from the 1700s. Quisque. It was mentioned around the Ontario Lake region in a book called Longhouse. I'm going to have to do some more research on that name because I'm not finding much online. So, that might be a university trip, digging into some archives to try to figure that name out. And if that does turn out to be an original name for the Mothman, I'm definitely going to do a piece on it, because that would be very interesting. So, what we're going to be talking about today are, let me turn this around, some of the Takwa creatures. All right. Then I don't have drawings of all of them. There are probably another 3 or 4 besides these guys. And I've got to double check these names. I'm going to go in and do a video on each one of these creatures once I get enough information about them. So the flying head may also be called a quisque, potentially. So their description is very peculiar. They are a disembodied head that doesn't, in most reports, does not have any feet. However, the drawing that accompanied the name for the Mothman, Quisque, doesn't look anything like the reports. It's got legs and it's a big round fuzzy ball. So this actually might be another creature. And maybe why I can't find it in actual connection to the Mothman is because it actually refers to a potential dinosaur. And I'll get into that when I start digging more into the flying head phenomena. And the reason why I decided to shift gears and not cover the Weebila this week is because there's a connection between the Kukunskwa, the southern Pueblo Thunderbird, and this entity called a Takwa Nuiki, if I remember correctly. All right, so let me take you back real quick before we get into more of a description on this guy, to one of my previous lives where I talked about Thunderbirds and the Adelcy, or Adelcia, these big, let me get these guys. So, during Coronado's travels into the Pueblo regions, there was an encounter, which I described in that live, with a Thunderbird, a Puebloan Thunderbird. However, part of the descriptions from, I think it was 1542 and 41, when they wintered with the Pueblo people. You also, when you're digging into Coronado's information about his search for the Golden City, El Diablo, you have to look for the information in 3 different locations. There's public record, that's the historic given. You also have to dig through Spanish military records of the time because there were reports done by Rodrigo Maldonado, who was, I believe, Coronado's captain. And there was also a report filed about Rodrigo de Paz, who was picked up and dropped. He was a new recruit that year. He was picked up and dropped by the Thunderbird when it attacked their stronghold, the Puebloan city. The cliff city that everybody is so familiar with is where this battle supposedly took place. Well, in the descriptions of what occurred after the Thunderbird dropped De Paz was that it first turned into a giant orb of light that had lightning coming from it, and they could still hear the creature's calls, and then it turned into something else. They didn't describe it as having a hat. However, later descriptions call this black entity, and one was just caught, supposedly, potentially, on trail camera footage outside of Laredo, Texas, just a couple weeks ago. And I posted that information in that person's retell of what happened and what the sighting was on their channel, and I posted that in my post section. So when you're looking into the Spanish military records about the encounter, it describes a shadow creature. It had a leathery body, long hair and feathers. It had hooks. It wasn't described as having a hat, but like I say, later Spanish. Now you have to understand that the Spanish held the West Coast until what, 1830, I think it was, when we had the Spanish-American War. Now the Spanish had pioneer homes all the way into lower Washington, into the Kelso area, and all the way over into central Oregon, central Washington, down through the Napa Valley, all through California. So there were later sightings of what they called what did they call them? The Los Vigilantes Oscuros. And they always described those later renditions as wearing a hat. The very first encounter description, though, sounds much more like the Kunin Hra Yinyoch. Yin Yin Lech. It's an Aleut word. I don't speak Aleut. My bad if I murdered the language. Anyway, this creature is very similar to what was caught in the Laredo, Texas. Excuse me. I'm a little nervous about talking about these things because lore says the more you talk about them, the more likely you are to encounter one, and I've already encountered one of these bad boys without a hat, and I don't want to call the thing back up, but I'm going to talk about him anyway, because it needs to be said. Alright, so the one that was captured in the Laredo footage looks very much like this. Now, historically, they're described in a couple different ways. Let's get into some of that, and then we'll get into the particulars. So, in the lore that my native grandmother was familiar with, and what I was able to confirm still, is, this sort of thing. Although they don't talk about the curse, because part of these things are likely cryptids, and part of them may not be cryptids. All right, so let's get into this information and get into just some basic description of these guys, and then we'll cover this individual in more detail and get into its territories and some of the old lore about it. All right, so in the Seneca, they're called Takwanyo Yeet, or Yeet, uh, oh, excuse me, Iroquois, not Iliute. It's a Kunin Hranye, but I might be murdering that really bad. Similar to the skinwalkers. So there is an element to some of these creatures. The flying head, for instance, is supposed to have originally been due to a curse, which also matches the Mothman stories. Uh, the Stikini is a giant owl, it's shapeshifter, but it's more likely a cryptid because people see it as a bird. It could also be a shapeshifter like the Thunderbird, though, like the Puebloan Thunderbird. I still have to do more research. Uh, when these things come about because of curses, like this guy is supposed to come around. He's a raven entity. A raven mocker is another name for these creatures. It's because of a tragic death. A child being murdered before their time. Family people, a woman being taken before their time, violence, that sort of thing brings about a potential cursed being. And sometimes they will embody a raven, an owl, or another entity. So there's that potential element with some of these things too. There's also some indication that this guy, the Raven Mocker, and even potentially this fellow might have come around because of cannibalistic acts. And that's where it also breaches into the terrain of the Wendigo and the Skinwalker. Some of these are potentially cursed entities that can take forms. And they're probably considered dark witches or dark medicine people in that occasion. The biggest problem with these guys is they are completely invulnerable to weapons. You can't shoot them. You can't poison them, evidently. Bullets don't supposedly work on them. Some can be hit. This guy in his animal form, if it was changing forms and wasn't two different entities, because there's also the possibility that there were two entities living in the area. And when one died, the other one activated, so to speak. Sometimes some regions have layered curses, and that's something I need to get into in more detail, but that's going to have to be when I'm talking about medicine people and different categories of medicine people within tribal systems. It's completely different than this stuff here. All right, these guys all hunt humans. In particular, they like to hunt women and children. Most of them have red eye shine or dark red eye shine. So don't confuse them. And the eye shine is usually at a greater distance. Like the eyes are further apart than Bigfoot's. And they're usually more, they're higher up in the woods or they're higher up in the, off the ground. And some of these entities can string out and be quite long, and some of them, there's a goat sucker from South America that I haven't even put in these drawings yet. That's a smaller rendition of these. It's a vampiric entity that, takes the energy of goats by hanging underneath them, according to my grandmother. And I've seen footage from South America of that kind of thing happening, and some from Taiwan, and I'm like, yeah, that looks like the goat sucker of her lore. But she also went into the chupacabra, and the chupacabra for her was a completely different critter. It was a lizard with spikes and spines. Didn't look anything like what people are calling a chupacabra today. Again, these things target children and women, animals. They like to take animals. They'll go after wild animals. They'll go after hogs. They'll go after goats, sheep. They can't take bigger game, it doesn't seem. So if they are physical entity. They got a weight limit of about 65 pounds of what they can pick up, maybe 85 pounds. Because I don't know how to weigh these things or really get an estimate of what the capacities are because they're just so ethereal. But they can pick up, uh, unlike this guy, they could pick up 150 pounds, 170 pounds, a human. These things can only pick up a child or a smaller woman, maybe of 5 foot, somebody that's not very big, something that's not very large, dogs, that sort of thing, cats. All right, and because they are shapeshifters, they can look differently. The one that was recorded was supposedly screaming. My grandmother claimed that some of them will whistle, some will call your name. The Stikini will call your name a lot. The Dark Watchers, they don't have a tendency to make a lot of noise, but they'll watch you. They'll watch you on ridge lines, etc. Okay. The most common descriptions for these things, though, is that they have wings, usually have beaks or primate-like faces. They have talons on their feet. Some are recorded as only having 3 toes, more bird-like feet, while still retaining human or ape-like or even clawed hands. Something the flying head does not have. It does not have hands. It does not have feet. It has hair and tentacles. And it has a jaw that can dislodge and open. Many of these things supposedly have jaws that can dislodge. They can swallow you whole. All right. Uh, some of them will have bird-like feathers mixed in with the hair. Some of them are reported of having bat wings. They take many different forms. Talons, like I said, with more human-like hands or primate hands. They can be anywhere from human size to roughly 9 feet, with this wingspan somewhere between 10 and 15. They're considered to have hairy bodies, long hair on their heads. Not always, though. Some are considered to be feathered. And then you got the Mothman that's both feathered and have bat wings. So God only knows. And some have no wings and have hats. And they're called the Dark Watchers. That's from the Spanish lore. And still to this day, in certain regions of California and Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, there's still Los Vigilantes Oscuros occurrences, encounters where people see these things, report them flying, report them standing. And there is one old lore piece from the Seneca, which my grandmother told me, and I've been able to refine the lore piece about this old Seneca woman who had been captured by something that was called the Stikini, but some versions of the story say it was one of the Takwa, and it took her to a cave where it had been eating children, and it had several children from her village that were caged. I think there were 2 or 3 in the little ravine back in the little cave. And she was told by it to cook the children for him. He couldn't cook. He couldn't make fire. So the old woman, out of fear, agreed. And she took her clothing and she wrapped rocks the size of the children in the in her clothing, blankets, and skins that it had left around, and heated the rocks in a fire. Meanwhile, it fell asleep, nodded off, waiting for her to cook the children. She loosed the children from the cage, brought the rocks forward, I think. I got my order out of place. She managed to steal the children, hide the children, wrap rocks. Then she brought the rocks, claiming they were the children, put them in the fire. It fell to sleep. She made sure the children were safely gone. And then she came back and made sure that the rocks were scorching hot and close to exploding. And she even doused the skins, according to my grandmother, in water before she woke the thing up. And she said, "Oh, the meal is ready. The children are ready to be eaten. You don't even have to take them out of the skins. Just swallow them whole." And she tricked the thing into swallowing them whole. She fed them to him. And it was that way that she killed it. She burned it from the inside, and supposedly one of the rocks exploded. The final one that she put in exploded and killed it. So that's the only Loric account of actually killing one of these things that I'm aware of. And it's still, you can still find that lore online, thank God. All right, now I said I'd get into more of these things. So there's lore of these that stretch throughout the Pine Barrens, all the way up into the Hudson Bay area. The Seneca natives, the Lakota, Dakota, they knew about them. There are a bunch of these things down in the Southwest they're even in the Ozarks. I think the Flying Head is in the Appalachians, if I remember right. So when I start getting into the details of each one of these creatures, and like I said, there are several more. I think there are 3 or 4 more that I haven't included here that I'm going to outline, and I will draw particular maps and give more details on each one of these creatures. But we'll start with this guy. Because, like I said, recently there's been a potential trail cam capture. So this guy might be the result of a curse. Are you protesting, baby? My dog is not happy. All right. So in the video, it does not have a hat. I added the hat because it's one of the most normal things that's seen in the Southwest when you see these things. It can also look more like the potato head thing out of, which was it, one of the vampire movies? Whichever one. I think you know which one. Anyhow, I'm not going to hype a freaking movie from Hollywood. So anyway, some of these things can open their mouths. I think the one that was captured in the trail camera might be one of the types that can open its mouth. Some ancient lore also suggests these things wore clay helmets or pots on their heads. I haven't found any modern lore remnants of that. I'm going to have to do some digging in some old historic books to find that lore again. So they could be confused as a flying head. They're seen around Yellow House territory a lot in Texas, actually. They are known to swallow their victims whole. These are the various names. They're called the Dark Watchers, the Los Vigilante Oscuros, Flying Heads, or the Takwa Neo. They're jet black. They usually have dark red eyes. They glow dark red eye glow. Some are known to have fangs and talons. They have bird-like or bat-like wing structure and leg structure in some events. The one that was caught looked like it had taloned feet, but it still had human or primate-like hands. And it did have the extra folds around its neck to indicate that it could swallow its victims whole. That's what the folds are, according to my grandmother. When you're dealing with these things, if they got folds around their necks, they can swallow you whole, so be careful. However, some of them might also be cursed. It might be a creature because of cursing, because there is some lore about that. And there is some indication that some that are cursed might be a case of possession. Now, when you're dealing with them in the Yellow House region of Texas and down into, when you talk about the Navajo and the Hopi and whatnot, don't get these things mixed up with the Nunaki, the dolphin uh, children. The dolphin children actually are not cursed. They are lost spirits, children that were lost during a migration from Europe to here. A land bridge collapsed and the children were lost. And I think it might be, I think it's Navajo or Hopi. I think they both have a rendition of the Nunaki. And they're the ones that migrated across the land bridge. Their lore even reminds us of it in this story about the Nunaki. So, talking about Texas. So, the recent filming was here around Laredo area. Now, this is along the Rio Grande. There's a lot of activity along the Rio Grande. There always has been. And this is where Coronado's sighting becomes relevant. So I put in his loop that he made while going through Texas, the Panhandle area. Now, this is Coronado's trail while looking for, uh, you know, and this also might be another indication of why we've got this peculiar Quivera or Quisque name relationship here. This might be a French variation of a Spanish word. I've got to look into that possibility as well. The city of gold, El Dorado. So he made it into Oklahoma or Kansas. He went through the panhandle of Oklahoma, the panhandle of Texas, and into Kansas before he turned around. And it was somewhere in this loop, I think here, is where he had his encounter, somewhere between 1540 when he first went into the area and 1542 when he came out. So he spent, 2 years on this loop in various positions looking for and following the directions of a priest. We're looking for the city of gold. So this peculiar encounter with the Thunderbird that picked the young private up and dumped him off a cliffside was in this region of Yellow House, Texas, from what I can discern. Which is actually not that far away. I mean, yeah, it's the other end of Texas, but the peculiar thing is when he was scouting, when Coronado was scouting upwards, he also scouted this section. Where is it here? This section. North and south, because I kind of did a miniaturized the upper part of the Rio Grande. He scouted north and south in the Rio Grande along this leg of it. If he would have gone a little further south, he would have found the second bridge here, but he came in from the wrong direction. Now, these are old trade routes. These are ancient trade routes. These were Ice Age era trade routes. This one is the one that comes down to the west coast. It goes up to California, and it's the lower half that comes from the bottom part of the Rockies and splits off through White Sands area and whatnot. And then around, I think it was Lubbock area, it splits off and goes up over to the bottom side of Kansas. And it was at one point connected to the Greater Lakes area. So he kind of scouted in the middle of this Y area of our ancient trade routes and encountered this bizarre stuff. And it's very close to some of the modern encounters. Now, one of the weird lore pieces that my grandmother claimed happened, I'm going to go over here where there's a little bit more light, was that during during the end of the Ice Age, where there was a lot of water melting going on, and a lot of areas were becoming unpassable, and they were having issues with, there was a lake in the central part of Texas at the time that would flood and then recede. So there wasn't always passage on one of these routes. And when it finally did dry out many, many years later, around, I think it was before the Younger Dryas event, from what my grandmother claimed. So probably around 20,000 years ago or so, it finally dried out enough that we could re-establish that route. And it was during this time, and then after the Younger Dryas event, this area actually was not harmed as much as the northern regions of the United States. Some of these people actually survived, so a lot more of their lore survived after the Younger Dryas. That's why the Hopi and the Navajo have so much more than some other tribes. It's because they didn't die out as bad as some of us. There was a war, supposedly, that occurred with the Stick Indians. Let me get back over to these guys to remind you. These guys, which I brushed on, I told you a bit about the fact that they had territory issues down in this Y section, and that they had a stronghold here. Some of the lore claims that these Takwa were caused by a curse that the Stick Indians put on travelers that warred over the trade route. So basically, the Stick Indians became unhappy with the fact that natives were not trading fairly with each other along this route, and they were trying to attack each other and take goods, because there was a period where we did go through that, and it was not a secure route. Nobody controlled it for a time. Nobody oversaw it for a time. So the Stick Indians decided to oversee it. And they put a curse in this region of the old trail system, stating that if you died unfairly, unjustly, before your time, etc., you would turn into one of these things, and you would guard this lower set of passages, the trails. That also caused some breakup between us and the Stick Indians. So some of these creatures might be the result of Stick Indian curses, of all things, potentially. And some of them might be cryptids, because of the reports of them being able to open their mouths to swallow a victim whole. That's very archaic feeding behavior, and that is very reptile-like in its feeding behavior. So I am not sure what to think of these things, but I'm going to do some more research, and we'll talk more about them as I learn more, and try to compare them to what I can remember of my grandmother's lore about them. So anyway, hopefully that's been helpful in trying to sort out some of the information about these things. There's quite a bit of lore about different types of these creatures. Uh, some of them indicate that they might be more physical. Some lore indicates that they might be the result of curses. Like some of these things can't leave the area they're in. The flying head, it's supposedly from a curse. It has a certain territory that it can go to, and it can't go anywhere else unless the curse reoccurs. And it's supposedly an ancient curse. So I'll get into that too. Let me go back up. If you got any questions, let's do some questions. Hey, Laura. Or Lorak. Or Laura. If I goof your name, I'm so sorry. Oh, wow. Hey, Brennan. Welcome. Glad you guys could attend. Oh, wow. West Virginia. Hey, Thumpers. Good to see ya. Okay. Hollis. I was curious about this creature being like a Mothman. Yeah, there is some lore crossover with that, I'm discovering. And like I said, I've got to figure out if there's been a Spanish or a French name for these things, or if there's a more proper Native American name I can do some research on. I've got to dig into them because yeah, my grandmother's lore and some of this lore is not matching. My grandmother's got some different details to her lore, so I need to try to find some cross links there to figure that out. Okay, bad pup. Yes, being being heavy is good thing. Yikes, swallowing whole. Yeah, that's another reason why I think some of them might actually be a cryptid. Because if they were just a curse creature, they wouldn't need to eat. And some of them don't eat. Like the Dark Watchers, the real shadow ones that just stand on the ridge line. Um, and some of the just shades that show up, they're energy vampires. They don't eat. They don't eat flesh and blood anything. So part of these creatures might be definitely curse related or possession potential. But the ones that swallow their stuff whole, that makes me think they might be just something we don't have any knowledge of today. Like it might be some sort of a supernatural cryptid. Or maybe we're just thinking it's supernatural because it's so peculiar, or maybe it has some special abilities that we are not aware of. Because not all of these things act alike either. They have different behaviors, and they like different territories. Uh, the ones in Texas, they like to be out in the open desert. The ones around San Antonio and in the Mexico's Arizona, they'll stand on ridge lines. Some of them have been seen flying. Um, but you get further east, they're more woodland or mountain. Some of them even are lake oriented. So that really makes me wonder, because the Stikini, he's seen around waterways a lot, and he's supposedly a giant owl that shapeshift. But there's also lore suggesting that it was a dark female medicine person that became the bird. And that goes back down to South American lore, Bruja, and the Bruja being able to turn into a shade or a shadow, a dark figure that flies, and is vampiric in nature. It could also just be a really ancient cult that we know nothing about. That would be a scary thought. But it is possible. Because we do have native lore about the deer woman. Um, Deer women are a dark spiritual creature, a dark medicine woman that has deer horns. So there might be something to it in the occult realm as well. I'm not really sure. I've got to dig into them more. Potato head pearl. Yeah. Hey bad pup. Hey yo. You should write a book. Oh yes. These drawings and this information. Part of the reason why I'm doing these shows is to start compiling my grandmother's lore and finding relevant lore that I'm compiling for my book writer. So he'll be getting all these notes. If I can get through all of this information by spring, which I really doubt, it's probably going to take me the better part of a year to cover all the different cryptids. So this might be a longer series than I thought. It might turn into an every winter season kind of thing, and I do my you know groundwork and filming during the summer, and then over the winter I might have to go back to doing presentations on this. But yeah, this binder is going to be filled and stacked with a bunch of information concerning different kinds of cryptids and entities and things that Native Americans had contact with, and things that we still understand, and some stuff we don't understand anymore. And if he doesn't use the material in the book that we're compiling together, then I will go ahead and compile it myself and continue to write. Because I don't think anybody's done a real kind of comprehensive loric comparison with cryptids and cryptid sightings yet. So I think that's a good avenue to approach, especially since I have a background in both due to my family. Might as well put it to good use. And this is sort of along the lines of what I wanted to do when talking about my grandmother's lore in a book anyway. I wanted to go through, that's why I've been trying to take pictures of cryptids so I can document some of the things that she spoke about, so I can actually put a picture to the creature. Some of these things I don't want to try to take pictures of, because I think they're probably a little too dangerous to take a picture of at any kind of close range. I'm glad, though, that somebody got this thing on trail camera. I'm happy for that. That gives some validity to people's sightings. And the fact that, there were more than one person sighting this thing. There were several individuals that saw it. And then the capture on somebody else's, unrelated trail camera. That, to me, is more evidence than even a researcher going out, because they're all unrelated incidences in the same area. So that, gives a point of validity that somebody intentionally looking for something might not have. Because you might be jaded toward your own research field. And you might look at everything as a possible entity when it may not be. But this being unconnected and unrelated between sightings, encounters, and the trail cam capture, though they were regionally all around Laredo on one particular end of the town, so to speak, but none of the people knew each other. So that's really good. The Laredo trail cam pic. Talking of, yeah. Yep, and I just posted a link in my post section to a piece on this and recounts of the encounters and the footage that the man was donated. He was given access to the footage to post it. So please go to my post section and go check out his information and do some back work on this guy, because one of them recently got filmed, and it's a creepy looking thing, and it matches the descriptions of the old lore pretty well. Alright, live in the woods, a bit cautious to even ask. Takwa, the shadow guys, how tall? Well, they can range anywhere from about human size, 5 foot, 6 foot, to 9 foot. Although some accounts say they can be bigger. At least old lore suggests they could be in the 10, 11 foot height range. And some of them could have 18-foot wingspans. But the more modern ones seem to be slightly smaller. They seem to top out at about 9 feet, according to most sightings. And their wingspans, 10 to 15 feet. And most things that they are discussed being able to pick up, or that people suspect that they've fed on, and they don't always, evidently, some of them don't always swallow everything whole. Sometimes they have to tear stuff apart. But the things that they're able to pick up are hogs, sheep, goats, dogs, children. I'm assuming stuff around the 65, maybe 85 pound range. So they've got a weight limit potentially, at least some of them. The ones that feed off your energy, though, the shadow creatures that are actually shadow creatures and don't have a need to eat, uh, they don't they don't pick anything up, but they will feed on you vampirically, according to my native lore and to my grandmother's understanding of them. So those are the more cursed side of those entities. They'll feed on your energy, whereas the more cryptid-like flying entities will feed on things. And I believe they're all carnivorous. I don't know any lore of them eating plants. So they're probably quite dangerous. I just don't know a lot about them, and I don't think anybody knows a lot about them. Even native lore doesn't know a whole lot about them. At least not that I've been able to find so far. I'm going to see what I can find, though. I might even have to go. I might have to go in April and go talk to some of the elders and see what they say about these things. Yes, yes, I will be adding. That's something I've already discussed with my co-writer. Even in the trail guide, I'm encouraging that we put in at least drawings of these things, regional maps, even if it's just a little reference guide in the back, and some basic descriptions of them, their behavior, what they do, that sort of thing. You know, a little brief kind of to make sure uh, that you get some basic information on as many of these little things as you get, as many of these cryptids as you can, because compilation books don't seem to occur a lot. There's a lot of focus on a particular type, you know, Bigfoot or Dogman or, you know, the woo factor or whatever connections people are making. There isn't a lot, though, that's being done in relation to native lore, the native understanding, and what's out there. And that's the premise of the field guide, is to approach it from a native lore perspective. So there will be some detailed information, very detailed about the ones that are friendlier and the ones that are not so friendly. And then I'm talking to him about putting in a glossary of like the different cryptids and then a glossary of the maps, so you'll know where they are and where they've historically been and what tribes have encountered them. And I don't know if our little first publishing book, because it's probably going to just be a little paperback thing. I don't know if I'm going to have enough pages to add in some other information, but we'll see how it goes. We're going to have another meeting in the spring when I hand off some of this information, and then I'll probably start piling up some more. Uh, or I might even just photograph all this for him and send it to him that way. Yeah, so those are the plans. We'll see how the writing goes. It's probably going to be a couple of years. It's not going to be something that gets popped out real quick. We do already have somebody that's willing to pay for its publication. That's not going to be an issue. It's just a matter of getting all of the information in correctly. Because we're both kind of nitpicky about what's going to go in the book. It's going to be a lot of my photography. It's going to be a lot of my family lore, but we're also making sure we cover some very common critters that people may have questions about, that you might encounter. Because the other end of this is these things are also sometimes considered will-o'-the-wisp type spirits. Because some lore suggests that the stakini, the big owl-looking thing, like the Pueblo and Thunderbird, can turn into a ball of light too. So I might be classifying these in little family groups. If the behaviors match, if the physicalities match, even though the territories don't, they might be cousin species of something. You know, like these two guys, the Stakini and the Kunukla, they might be cousin species of some sort. Yeah, this thing might be an owl and not a parrot. Maybe it has some parrot-like characteristics, because both of them are supposed to have sharp feathers. Although this one's supposedly an old witch, this one's supposedly a cryptid. Um, I don't know. Those two in particular make me really wonder. Because we have had we've had massive birds in the ancient time. Coniferous period? We had giant insects. We had centipedes that were 6 feet long. We had hummingbirds that were the size of freaking VW bugs. So finding a giant owl during that period or a giant parrot, it's pretty likely actually. So those two critters might actually just be leftover historic animals. As you know, the Tukmanogi, yeah, might also be that. You know, it's considered a giant raven of some sort. The peculiar thing is with that particular creature, it's very similar to the Japanese island stories about the Tengu, which also is considered a dark spiritual entity magician who takes raven form, has fiery red eyes, and the characteristics sound so much like the Seneca lore about this other critter. It's makes me kind of wonder on that one. So those are just some of my thoughts on these things. I've got to do more research. I've got to outline more information. But yes, my book will have some of this information in it. Like I said, it's going to be a long process. Sorry about that. It's just we want to make sure there's lots of information and it's useful. We're going to include things like the warning symbols, the petroglyph for the Ryogen, sickle man. We're going to include the boogeyman marker for dangerous cryptid, red bone cryptid in the area, as part of the trail information. We're also going to include some of the examples of kana the most common kana that you will run across, some of the little trail talk stuff, so that you can identify what's around you while you're hiking or when you're out in the woods. We're also going to include probably a few footprints, some of the types of structures that you might run across, just as some reference material, so that if you're wanting a quick reference and you want to look up the territory these different things have been cited in, you've got it in hand. And I want to make it kind of like a little Audubon guide, Audubon, where you can just flip through the categories and it's right there for you. We'll see how close we can get with that. Oh yeah, there are night parrots in Australia. We actually have a night parrot in South America too, and it's a vampiric parrot. It's called the green parrot. It runs around on the ground. The weird thing about it is it likes to come up to cows at night, and like a vampire bat, they'll cut a little round hole right at the top of the hoof, the soft part of the tissue, and they will lick the blood-licking parrots uh, from the wound. So there's at least a couple of parrots that fit that description that are modern, that still go after animals. So those might be some historic animals kicking around that we don't know about yet. Right? Exactly. You have a very good point, Spider. Reiki are also a collection of dark Japanese evil spirits. Correct. And the other peculiar thing from my grandmother's lore, when she was talking about Los Gatos, California, and the supposed Asian immigrants that came from underground through the cave system. There's some lore that suggests that some of these dark entities came with them. So, potentially, some of what we have here may have also migrated from other countries like Japan. And I have to get into how that trail system works, because that one goes from, and that trail system is all under the surface of the planet. It's all under the crust. And I don't know exactly where or how it goes. I know it takes 3 to 3.5 years to get through it. And it goes from a cave, I think it's on the north face of Mount Fuji in Japan. And the outlet for the cave is in San Jose, California, Los Gatos area, because the Los Gatos cave is supposedly the other end of the cave at Mount Fuji. The weird thing is the albino natives from that cave are very Asiatic looking, and the lore suggests that not all of them left the cave to commingle with the natives on the west coast. Some of them stayed in the cave and remained the way they were, albinistic and hanging out with these dark shadow entities. The weird thing is there's peculiar lore about the Spanish being able to communicate with some of the creatures in that cave. And they even had festival days where they would bring stuff as trade good or offering to the creatures that lived in that cave. Now that habit died out when the Spanish lost control of the West Coast. So it was still being practiced in the 1830s. There's still some local lore in that region that people still know about how the Spanish interacted with the creatures from that cave. So there's a possibility that maybe the Tengu came over from Japan. Maybe they're just another immigrant. That's a scary thought, but why not? I mean, everything else moves around this planet. We moved around this planet how many times? Right? Yes, there is also a type of sparrow that drinks blood. You are correct. There are a few birds that do that sort of weird stuff. So it's a possibility. We don't know. We don't know every species that's ever lived on this planet. We have no idea of that. We have a little bit of information about a very few of them. And if you if you go back into the Vedas and the texts of India and all of their records of how many different species that are supposedly here, over 6, maybe 8 million species. Maybe these are just unidentified species that we don't know about yet. It's quite possible. And if we've got past records that are more complete than our 1.2 million that we are aware of today in our records, in our biological records, and we've got a big gap of what? Almost 7, a little over 7 million things that we don't know about. It's a lot of wiggle room. Okay, dear 8. Native lore is hard to find in common talk. Oh yeah, no kidding. It's been handed down by mouth. Yeah, it has. That's why I always go, when I can't remember something about my grandmother's lore, or I find something in a book that I go, I'm not sure about that, I go talk to my elders. Just because my grandmother and my mother are gone, doesn't mean I don't talk to other medicine people and other elders from other tribes, because I do. And I talk to native hunters as well a lot because they still live out there. Seal hunters in particular, they still run across all kinds of weird stuff out in the ice flows and up north. So I always talk to tribal people. I know tribal people, or I go live with people on res because there's still a lot of entities on res that you don't find off res as easily. I always go talk to my elders, so or other native medicine people that have teaching. A lot of our lore was never preserved in books. In the few attempts that were made to preserve it, it's usually a mishmash. It's some European, unfortunately, trying to take a bunch of different lore and shove it together and make one cohesive story out of it, which is not how our lore works. Our lore works individually. It's per tribe. Each group of people have their own way of understanding and being, and they have their own cryptids in their own areas. So you really can't shove them all together. Heck, we don't even speak the same language next door. You know? Yeah, the West Coast had 500 different languages on it, for criminy sakes, with like 18 major dialects, and some people couldn't even, cousin groups couldn't even talk to each other. It's part of the reason why central tribes in the plains area, why we reverted to hand talking. We couldn't talk to each other. We couldn't speak each other's language. Even though we Lakota, Dakota, Nakota, Seneca, we're all cousin groups, but we didn't even speak each other's language. They were all slightly different. So things we always communicated by hand, and that's not uncommon when you have cultures that can't speak each other's language. The other is we couldn't share each other's lore unless there was marriage and somebody learned both languages, which was often how we learned to speak each other's language. We had the nephew over here, or the brother-in-law's kid who married into the family. He might be Cheyenne, we're Lakota. All right, he's going to be our interpreter, our translator for this event, for whatever occasion is happening, trade, etc. The other is don't make the mistake of thinking that we were always at each other's throats. If Native Americans were as violent as everybody claimed, there wouldn't have been over 535 attempts to make peace with colonizers over 400 years. There would not have been over 300 peace treaties if we were all out kick ass going to kill anything in front of us and each other. We wouldn't have negotiated. We would have just slaughtered you. So, a lot of the unrest with modern understanding of natives is due to being pushed on. It is due to being overrun. It is due to an internal breakdown of our trade routes, our traditional pacts with each other, our traditional alliances with each other, by intrusion by the French, the Spanish, and other Europeans over the last 400 years. Before that, we had a stable trading system, and it was international. There's plenty of evidence to suggest that. No, we've only been at war with each other the last 400 years, thanks to being invaded. Or we wouldn't have all the trade routes that we have. When you really look at how laced North America and South America is with trade routes, you cannot force the idea that we were always at each other's throats on me. And it doesn't jive with what I was taught either. Anyhow, there's my lecture. Hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope this has been informational. Okay, Spider, if I ask my Japanese shaman, would you be interested in talking to him in an interview? I'll ask him to. Oh wow, that could be very interesting. because one of my teachers, my Japanese aunt, Kotsuko, she told me some very interesting lore about some of the unusual spirits in Japan, the Namahugi, uh, Gamahugi, the different kinds of cryptids in northern Japan. It would be very interesting. That could be very interesting indeed. Means I'd have to mind my mouth. So yeah, I'll get into more detail on these guys as I get more research done. And like I said, I may not be able to do any lives next 2 weekends. And if that's the case, I will be doing drawings and putting out, 5-10 minute videos uh, with more detail on some of these shadow beings. And I'll also do my piece on the Weebila, the little people, because they're a creature that can be anywhere, and they're actually a good forest spirit, thank goodness, because there are a lot of dark things around. Oh, okay, cool. Thank you, Spider. Awesome. Yeah, I am not against talking and learning. You know, I have some lore, but I'm sure there's plenty more information out there that I don't know anything about. And I'm always open for learning, because without learning, you can't figure things out. You can't discuss them coherently, and you can't make any hypothesis if you don't have information to go on. And I think, a lot of these things are probably more international than we realize. And you might be a little different in their structure. They might be different in their method of getting there, but there are just so many similarities in some cases that it's a little. We either had to have all been on the same place at the same time at one point in time, like maybe Pangea, or maybe we've just migrated around more than we realized, because, we've only got the last maybe 6,000 years of human existence in fossil records. Or not 6,000, 6 million years, excuse me, that are really reliable as modern humans. We don't have a lot of fossils of other things, and it's, primarily because, one, we probably either haven't found them, we may not have dug deep enough, or maybe we've just passed them over a couple dozen times. Like the latest find of the Neanderthal at the Lavat Cave. We've been in that cave for, what, 32 years? And he was laying right at the front edge of the cave, and he was just accidentally discovered a couple of years, not even, just a year ago, I think it was, because they decided to move the debris pile and carve into that area next to the rock face in front of the cave, because they finally found something that looked unusual. And then they find a completely different, isolated Neanderthal that had come to the cave that had completely different genetics than anything around that area. A newcomer to the region, and he passed away in that cave. So there, might be instances where we're digging in a correct location, maybe even in the La Brea tar pits. We're getting a lot out of the tar pits. Maybe there's more stuff around the tar pits that we don't even know about. There could be a lot of stuff that we haven't found yet, and that's just going to take time. The others is maybe the locations haven't produced any fossils because there's not enough mineralization in the area. And no, mineralization does not have to take an immense amount of time. On average, it takes 50,000 years. However, in a mineral-rich area that had a lot of mud geysers, for instance, like the West Coast had a lot of mud geysers. We still have active mud geysers in Geyserville, California, for instance. There's still 200 active mud geysers in that region. When you have a region like that, then you have a possibility for fossils or for rock to be fossilized, which is part of the reason why all the rock, the bedrock in the riverbeds in this area have fossilized, is because there have been a lot of mud fossil geysers throughout the Northwest, Northern California, the redwoods, old growth, down into the sequoias, up here into the Northwest. Most of our geysers are no longer functional, but you can still find the evidence of where they were bubbling up. And all of those regions have a lot of basalt that's been petrified with a lot of tracks. And that was something Uncle Long also talked about, was how mineralized the Northwest actually is. There's a high likelihood of finding fossils here. It's just you can't dig in the Northwest hardly at all. We've got some really peculiar topsoil laws. And you gotta have a lot of permission slips to even start to think about it. And we have some cave systems here in Central Oregon. What are they called? I call them the Sun Caves or Snake River Cave system. They've been yielding some unique stuff recently, some new fossils that we never knew existed, um, some new campsites that we never, and people that we never knew existed. So they're planning on expanding that dig site. Hopefully they do. It would be interesting to see what's found there. Um, the other is there's just not enough interest and funding to do digs. Nobody seems to be interested in archaeology anymore. At least not Native American archaeology. That's why I'm a little thankful that we've got the Natural History Museum that has such an interest in Native American culture, and we've got a longhouse here at the university that's got a Native museum attached to it. So I'm glad that we have a little funding to do some Native research, because we can find some really old stuff here in the Northwest. Probably some really ancient stuff. Hopefully we will get the funding to do so and we can explore more. Oh, I'm glad that you like my shows, Octopus. Dear. W. Michael and Kathleen Gear have written many books on Native Americans and their history. I've read everyone they have written. They are my favorite authors on that subject. Oh, cool. I will have to look into them. I do have a couple of older lore books too. I think they're all out of publication at this point. I gotta dig those out when I go through stuff. Oh, okay, cool. Awesome. Thank you, Spider. So yeah, then I'll go back to my normal shows, but then the next couple of weeks it's probably going to be just some videos until I can get everything dealt with. And hopefully, this has been some interest of, and hopefully brought some clarity. Part of the thought on why some of these things wear a cowboy hat. My grandmother had an old lore piece that was supposedly from the Old West, so it was a more modern tale. And it was claimed that the Pueblo people that had been tortured by the Coronado group had become wandering spirits. That was one of the Old West stories about them that was passed around by pioneer families. And that was the reason for the hat. They had the concept that the southwestern Indians always wore a felt hat, which was hilarious because we didn't wear a felt hat until we were given felt hats. So I think that piece of lore is more modern, folklore, or maybe what you call city lore. But it's an interesting footnote. as to why it might be wearing a hat. Any of them might be wearing a hat. But then there are some cryptids that wear hats, so who knows? But I thought it was an interesting folk tale. Right? Yeah, exactly, Cosmic. Some have attributed the black cowboy hat to Men in Black types, also a gaucho type hat. Yeah, and it makes me wonder because there was supposedly a couple of individuals in the Coronado party that were killed, supposedly. Some accounts say there were two or three, some say one died from illness, another died from an infection, other accounts say nobody died and they all made it back, you know, except for Coronado, who ended up getting run over by his captain. See, the quest for El Dorado ended because Rodrigo Maldonado and Coronado were racing one day because they like to horse race with each other, supposedly, and Coronado's horse's saddle supposedly slipped or the belt ripped, and Coronado got trampled by his horse and the horse behind him, which Maldonado was on. Rodrigo Maldonado was on. Um, so, if the old woman that they talked to, because in the account there's also a native Puebloan elder woman that they talk to, and she tells them about, she talks to Coronado and Maldonado, and she tells them about the curse of the Takwa and how the big bird, this guy was a spiritual protector and could change forms and what have you. Now, when she explained to them that anybody that died before their time or died cruelly, unjustly, would turn into one of these things and become a vengeful spirit in the region guarding it. It was 2 days after that Coronado got ran over by Maldonado's horse. Maldonado wanted to push forward. The story had not dissuaded him. There had been a difference of opinion between the military that was under him and he and the priest. You know, Coronado and the priest. They wanted to go forward. The military's like, we're running across stuff we don't want to deal with. We're being told about phantasmic creatures that we could turn into if we die wrongfully in this area. Maybe we should not go here. And then the accident happened. Makes me wonder, because that seems kind of intentional. If you've got a leader that doesn't want to give up on something, Alexander the Great suffered from this. He was likely poisoned by his own people. Coronado might have been run over to turn the party around, because Coronado did die eventually from gangrene. So some of the southwestern lore suggests, and there were some folk tale stories suggested that Coronado's people, they're the ones that ended up with the hats. And then there's some lore that says, oh, it's the Apache or the Puebloan that were wearing the hats, and that's the reason why the creature has a hat. I have no idea. But people do see him with a hat. Who knows what the real answer is there? But it's some interesting lore and some unusual stuff. And if you really want to get into the nitty-gritty about Coronado's information, you have to look in three places. Your standard history account, the military account, because there was a trial in Spain after the party got back because Coronado died. So there was a military investigation, so you've got military reports on it and a trial with documentation that way, and you do have inquisitional paperwork filed by the priest in the party, who was later discredited and ended up dying. But he actually had to, as did the military, and Rodrigo Maldonado had to testify about the treatment of Native Americans under both the hands of Coronado and the priest. And then the priest also filed inquisitional paperwork with the papacy. So the really nitty-gritty details are in the papacy records. Because you not only get what they did to the Native Americans in that region, not just starving them and beating them, they crucified a couple of them. At least that's what the native lore says, and what the papacy records say. And that also, the Franciscan monks in Paso Roble, California, they also have inquisitional records where they crucified 27 Native Americans in all one tribal group because they refused to convert. So you've got to dig into the papacy records on this particular ground game for Coronado. So you've got 3 sets of records you can refer to, and they all have slightly different information and slightly different points of view. You've got Coronado's, which is the historic account, which is normally out there, his point of view. And then you have the military records with Rodrigo Maldonado, his captain, and I cannot remember the name of the priest, but you can find his name within the other records pretty easily. And they all give slightly different details. You know, Coronado has a more religious, as does the priest. You know, everything's a demon. The military men have a more physiological approach. Well, the thing bleeds, we can shoot it, means it's going to die. And Coronado goes back and forth between the two aspects, you know, advisors, basically. Do we go at this as it's something that's physically attackable? Which is what Coronado decided with the Thunderbird. That's why they went after it with guns and cannons. And then the result was it changed into a ball of light, and then it turned into a shadow being. And then the old lady told them, "Oh, no, 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 you can't kill these things. They're more than what you realize." And then they got all wiggy and started freaking out over the military boys. They all wanted to leave after they realized that they could be turned into something like that. They're like, "No, no, 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 no. I don't want to be a damned soul. Let's leave." So you have different cultural perspectives too. You've got a more religious and a more military perspective on that particular ground outing, so to speak, which is something you don't normally find. You'll find, you know, from a military aspect, or you'll find it from a loric aspect, but you don't typically find both. So that's the one nice thing about Coronado's jaunt for El Dorado. Okay, Sovereign. Oh, excuse me, Spider. It's really hard to feel hatred towards these groups. Yeah. Cosmic Sovereign. Regarding Pueblo structures, seen more videos where some of them got knocked down flat recently. Oh, God, no. And what? Okay, I've seen some videos where some of them got knocked down flat recently. Also, some structures looked as if they got built recently with visibly fresh mud. Way more to learn. God, I hope people aren't going into those canyons and defacing that shit. They're not supposed to touch any of that stuff. And if there are cryptids in there rebuilding stuff, huh? Or if there are lost tribal people still living in some of those regions, which is possible. The fresh mud. That's interesting. That would be somebody that actually knows the old way. I might be a lost tribe. Could also be holy people that go up into those areas, because sometimes medicine, when some ceremonies require that you go to certain locations, so sometimes medicine men will go back to an area and recapitulate it for a particular family ceremony, depending on what the ceremony is. Right, they're not supposed to touch, yet they don't listen. Seen videos where they're standing on top of rocks. They shouldn't be. I know. I've seen a lot of that too. So another reason why I feel like, it's before before our culture is completely dismantled on the physical level, because that's what it feels like to us natives when people do that shit. We've already lost a lot. And then to have it modernly disrespected as well, even though it's supposedly under protection. It's it's heartbreaking. Right? Yeah. Nobody should be out there messing around building stuff unless they belong there, and they don't belong there. So, it was sort of like the people that went down to the Nazca lines and screwed with them. That stuff hasn't been touched for 40,000 flippin' years, and then some goofball protesters a couple of years ago went down and rearranged a bunch of the rocks. That's an UNESCO World Heritage Site. Thank God they all got fined, but I see that, and then there are even the sites that are not protected. They claim the stuff in the Southwest is protected, but they don't protect it in any way. And God only knows who's going through there. If it isn't directly on tribal land and, there's nobody there to shoo people away, God only knows who's going through in some of those regions, because they aren't. A sign tells you they're protected, for Christ's sake. There's nobody there to enforce it, which means it's really not protected. It's just a sign, unfortunately. Hey, hi, Mike. Glad you came. Sorry, it's almost to the end of this. I'm sitting at an hour and a half. We've pretty well gone over the shadow creatures, and we're just kind of been talking about defacement of Native American cultural sites, and that sort of thing. And then the ones that aren't even protected, like all of the trackways here that I am aware of that are sitting in bedrock that's anywhere between, 45 million and 300 million years old. There's little tiny signs, way up in the tops of trees that say, "Oh no, you can't go off road in here on this bedrock. It's protected, but no petition, no sign at the location." And anybody that's booneying out and doesn't bother to stop and read a sign that's 30 feet up a tree in little tiny white print on a black sign. And I kid you not, there are signs in Oregon here with our forestry that's like that your informational signs are these little tiny, you'll breeze right past them. You won't even know what they are if you don't look, if you aren't aware, if you're unfamiliar with the area. And people do that all the time, and then they'll, go off-roading on locations that are not even marked for off-roading. In the state of Oregon, in order for you to off-road, you have to be on a numbered roadway. Has to be, a post with a freaking number on it. And people in certain, in the Marcola region, they know that because it's very clear. The Army Corps of Engineers makes it very clear in that region what is the case. But in other local forests that also have the same rules, they make the signs small because it's not a big attraction site. So people will breeze past those signs not knowing that the same rules apply in every location. It was something my mom always pointed out to me, but it's something that, foreigners moving in, people migrating from another state, They don't know. And then they destroy shit and think they have a right to and think they look cool doing it. It makes me want to bitch slap them. Excuse me. Okay, Spider saw a video of an Indonesian woman in the forest. She moved some bones. Then she went violently tumbling backwards. Yeah, and that's something that also happens in old Native American burial sites and some of them. You don't go in there unless you've got a medicine person with you, because some of them are dangerous. And weird stuff will happen in some burial sites. So there are reasons why some cryptids stay around them. It's to actually probably keep people away because they're dangerous or known to be a dangerous area. And that's something that's, lorically missing now too. People don't know those things anymore. They're not aware of those stories. Cosmic, this is why I am big on not touching anything of theirs. In your case, why it's different. Oh, I see. It's different. You have to lift something since, yeah, it's your descendant. As long as things get placed right back where it was. Yeah, and I try to always do that. Occasionally I will ask them if I can take something like a tool, and if they give me permission, I will do that. But by and large, I leave stuff alone. Because sometimes there are traps, too. You reach inside one too many structure and you find a poison spike or some other mechanism that can trap your hand or gouge your arm. You start paying attention. You become a little more situationally aware that you might be walking into a trapped area, for instance. And it didn't help falling down a hillside through a trap designed to kill a dog man. That really brought reality home for me that everywhere I go is not safe to be in. So, I have a few experiences that way that make it a little more in my conscious mind about don't pick stuff up. Looks like Doggo's protesting she's hungry. Okay, okay, you want the rest of your meal? Yeah, I heard you messing with your food over there. Looks like I have a calling. I need to feed the doggo. All right, baby. So I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. Um, and if you got any more questions, now is your time. Okay, Spider, I bring lots of rocks home. I do ask them if they want to come with me. Most of them have faces on them that I can see. Do you think that's okay? As long as you've asked. Hey, Cosmic says hi, baby. Oh, really, baby? Yeah. Tail wagging. Oh, boy. Yeah, people love you, honey. She had a good result for that. Anyway, guys, uh, thank you again for being here. Like I said, I'll go ahead and get into more specific drawings on some of these guys, and I'll get into more detail on the different shadow beings. And yes, I did have an issue with one at one of my work facilities for a moment. Uh, my friend and I have completely managed to rid the property of it at this point. Thank goodness. And I'm pretty sure whatever it was somebody bringing the thing there, or it had been left there, or brought there. Because it didn't want to leave. But it's gone now. I had no choice. I have a friend who's a deliverance minister. That's the fellow who's got Bigfoot on his property, and he helped me pray over the location to get rid of the shadow entity, and it hasn't surfaced again. So at least it won't be hanging out in the gymnasium at the school anymore, because several coworkers had heard laughter and other peculiarities and had stuff move and things shift in that building, and they all thought it was a little girl's ghost, and it didn't turn out to be a little girl's ghost. It turned out to be a shadow entity pretending to be a little girl. And we got rid of that. It doesn't need to be around children, put it that way. Sorry to be grandma on ya, but I'm not letting any dark entity hang around any school or daycare or any other medical facility I work in to clean. No, thank you. They need to be gotten rid of. I'm the same way, Spider, I understand. Uh, Sovereign, I like the later nighttime for the live stream. Oh, okay. I might then do it later. Thank you. Yeah, I wasn't sure. I ended up so busy today. I ended up cooking an experimental root today I had never cooked before and had never tried before. It's called a Jerusalem. Well, some people call it a Jerusalem sunflower or artichoke, but it's a Jerusalem root from a Jerusalem plant. It's a little potato spud looking thing, and they taste just like an artichoke heart. Although they're not, don't recommend eating them if you're a diabetic because they're high insulin. But it was a new food. I'd never tried it before. Uh, the fellow here who owns the property, he grows them in his garden. He's got a few in his yard, so we decided to try one today. And it cooked up really nice. It was really good. Really yummy. In fact, I think I'm going to encourage him to grow more because I really like them, and he liked them too. So I think we'll have more dinners with those involved. Old Jerusalem roots. Oh, welcome. Glad to see you, Susie. I'm sorry we're almost over with the show. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask them. First timer, sorry I missed the whole thing. I am of Pueblo tribe, southwest New Mexico. I would have loved to have asked you questions. Oh, cool. Maybe you can help me out too, because I have a few questions about some of the entities down there that I have lore about, but I've never seen myself. Yeah, Jerusalem, God, they're not called an artichoke. They're called a sunflower or Jerusalem. What did he call them? It's a Jerusalem root. It's a Jerusalem artichoke. If you look it up by Jerusalem, if you look it up by Jerusalem artichoke, you'll find it as a root that looks a lot like, or very similar to a ginger root, but it's rounder, and it cooks up like a potato. You can bake them or you can fry them. They taste like an artichoke for the most part, like an artichoke heart to be specific, but they've got that kind of potato texture to them. They're a little softer. They're really good. Really good. They're really good. I was really surprised. Yes, and they do taste a little sweet, especially when you get to that edge of the skin. They almost taste sweet potato-ish, and have kind of a sweet potato texture, and that outer layer is softer in the center. They're really good. If you ever had a chance to try them, and they grow, you can grow them wild in your garden. Because he didn't even plant the seeds. Birds brought the seeds in. He was able to identify which plant it was, and he's been cultivating them for the last couple of years, and they're finally now getting, you know, little bulbs about yay big around, about 3 inches long. So they're finally getting to a size where they're edible. Yeah, I'm glad the more natives have come, because maybe you can help me with this one. The Coronado stories about the Thunderbird. This is only from a description. I don't know what they really look like. I don't know what the lore really says about them. If you have any ideas, if you know any lore about them, I would be more than happy to understand it. Because my grandmother traveled to the Pueblo areas in the Hopi region, to the Navajo regions, and further down into South America, and talking to elders, talking to other medicine people, but that's not our region. It's not, we have marriage ties to that region, but we don't have enough leftover lore from that area. I'm still trying to learn it, so to speak, remember it. Mm, spider sweet potatoes is one of the rare foods that delivers nutrition all the way through. Yep, yep, yeah. Yeah, there are some foods that we eat that are really good for us, and there are lots of foods that are not good for us. I try to stick with the ones that are better for us, and I'm not opposed to eating out of the wild. I do it all the time. In fact, here, once the rose hips come on and out at the coast, because we get old hellebore rose. Now, hellebore is a wild rose in the northwest. Do not eat the roots of it. Cannot eat that part of the plant. That was poisonous. But the rose hips are huge. They're the size of a 50-cent piece. They're really fleshy, and they have almost a kumquat-ish taste to them. They're really good. So in the fall when they come on, I go out to the coast and I go collect a bunch of them. You can make some really good jelly out of them too. They make nice marmalade. And they're 400% more vitamin C in them than an orange. So their nutritional value is higher. Awesome. Do you have the pink hellebore or the, let's see, there's pink, red, and white hellebore here. It's real hard to find the red hellebore anymore on the west coast, though. We can find the pink and the white all the time, but red is getting, they're almost wiped out. They're almost extinct. They're really hard to find. But yeah, those the great big hips off the hellebore roses, those are really good eats. They make really good jellies and jams, and they're really good on your vitamin C level. You can also dry them and put them in pemmican. No fruit. Oh, a rose hip is a rose hip. All rose hips and roses are actually edible. You just can't eat the roots. Or the roots on almost all roses are poisonous. But everything above, you can candy petals. You can put rose petals in salads, believe it or not, if you wanted to. I've had rose petal salad. It's big in the Mideast. So is rose petal flavored ice cream. Spanish also thing for rose petal ice cream, which I've also had. I love this stuff. A lot of people don't like it because it tastes like roses. I've also had violet ice cream and candied violets, that sort of thing, because my grandmother used to do violet ice cream all the time. My native grandmother, she liked violets in that way, and she candied them too. You know, there's a lot of different food sources we don't eat anymore. That, native people ate it once, and indigenous people around the world ate that we don't. Yeah, we eat so much processed stuff that comes out of a box these days. We don't even know what's good in our yard to eat. Well, we've been at it for an hour and 45 minutes. I probably should say goodnight and get on with my evening. I have to go work still. But like I said, over the next couple of weeks, if I can't do lives in the next weekends, I will be doing some more little shorts, and I'll get into specific different shadow creatures and potential cryptids that are shadow-like shapeshifters. Hopefully that will keep us all entertained until I can get back out in the field. It's still going back and forth between It'll be a sunny day, and then it'll be rainy by the afternoon. So it'll be a sunny morning, rainy afternoon. Or we'll get, a partially sunny day and then more cloud cover and rain. So it's not the best yet. Hopefully soon. I'm still happy that we're getting the snow and the rain, though. We need it. Yeah, you're welcome. And it looks like Doggo's calmed down, but I really need to feed her. Anyway, thank you everybody for being here this evening. And I think, yeah, I'll do these a little later. Uh, maybe more around 5-ish. It seems to be a little better for my schedule too, because then I can just turn around and go to work afterwards. And I've got my whole morning to make sure my notes are in order and I've got everything ready. Anyhow, if I don't see you in the next 2 weekends, you'll see videos from me, and then I'll go back to doing, hopefully, weekend shows. Take care, everyone. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you all. Make sure you like the like button if you like the show, and share it if you enjoyed the content. The regular routine, guys. Take care, everyone.